Two Interact's competency management system is a part of the talent management suite and is integrated closely with job classification, career planning, succession planning, training and development, as well as performance management. This means you can do competency-based performance appraisals. You can create career plans to develop competencies. You can suggest successors based on the competency profile, and you can create training plans based on competencies. The competency management setup is under our policy menus, where we can define how we want to use competency management. There are many different things that we can do. By definition, competencies can vary based on industry, occupation, or job, but also in our case, we have the ability to define competencies at the job task level. Let's take a brief look at the setup for the competencies. You can define up to 9 different tiers of competencies here. You can group the competencies logically in tiers like personal effectiveness competencies, academic competencies, workplace competencies, and so on. Let's look at personal effectiveness competencies. You'll notice that everything is user-defined because many companies will have their own competency framework. The system allows you to define the framework the way you want to. You can identify the source of your competency framework, in this case, the Office of Personnel Management at the Department of Labor, and you can apply these competencies to specific job groups, job classes, and job categories. Now, those are the competency groups. Let's look at individual competencies. As an example, I have a competency called active learning. It is an academic competency, and I can define whether it is required in a job group or job class and how you can obtain this competency. There's a lot more detail, including the evaluation scale, whether this is very valuable, how urgent it is to have this competency, and how important this competency is for the job. Maybe you are using proficiency levels within your competency framework, in which case I can define up to 4 levels. In my example, I've set up a basic, advanced, and superior level, and I can decide what the behavior indicators are of the basic level of active learning versus the advanced level of active learning, or the superior level of this competency. We could also create a link with our training and say that this particular training course is especially useful for the superior and the advanced level of active learning. Finally, I can even associate this with specific education degrees that are relevant for this purpose. Now, once we've created this library of competencies with its levels and its behavioral indicators and its association with specific industries, occupations, job groups, and job classes, and so on, then you are ready to conduct a job competency analysis. Let's take a look at one example, and that is the competency analysis that's been done for the job of support analyst. In this case, we are looking at the personnel effectiveness competencies for support analyst, and we are defining at what level we need the employee to be for each one of these personal effectiveness competencies, and how important it is, how urgent it is, and how valuable would this be to the company. The same thing applies for academic competencies. Here's a set of academic competencies, and remember that these are user-defined. You create as many competencies as you like, and you can also define again at which proficiency level you need to be as a support analyst in terms of writing, reading, mathematics, and so on. The same concepts apply everywhere else. For example, here I have workplace competencies. These are all the workplace competencies that are provided from a standard library. And here are the ones that I've selected from this library and the levels at which I would need an employee to be who's hired as a support analyst. Let's finish the management competencies in this case. I have a list of management competencies, and I can see which ones we've selected and at which proficiency level you need to be. Once the job competency analysis is done, we know exactly what is required of an employee in that particular job. The next step is to do an employee competency evaluation. This could be part of the standard employee appraisal. One of the 3 dimensions defined in a particular plan could be competencies, And this will list the competencies that we would like the employee to be appraised on, which can then be associated with smart actions, and so on. Each competency will have training courses associated with it, and will have more details that can be used. But if you are not using 2Interact's performance management, you could do evaluations directly under Employee Competency Evaluation. We could score employees with superior, advanced, and basic levels, which we have predefined, and for each competency we can add additional recommendations for coaching or for on-the-job training, in terms of the number of days of training and what kind of job that the person should be trained on in which organization unit, when to start this training, and so on. There's a lot of additional detail that we can add here. For each competency, the system will also suggest training courses. We can also do a gap analysis, where the system will list for me those proficiency levels which the employee is missing for specific competencies. The ones in red here are the ones that are missing. We can analyze this further, and depending on the rules that we have set up and the calculation methods that we use, we could actually calculate the variances in terms of where are the biggest gaps and what it is exactly that we need to do in order to make sure all our employees can reach the right required level for each specific competency. Now, when we want to develop employees' competencies, there are many ways of doing that. One of them is to select the competencies that we're concerned with, and for any of these particular competencies, you can then create a career plan to help you develop that specific competency. The system will give you the current score and the outcome of assessment that's been done so far. So if you want to look at professionalism as a competency and career plan for this competency, the system will automatically open up the career planning system and define the career plan type as one to build competencies, specifically professionalism in this case. If you have invested the time to collect all the data on your employees, then now is the time to leverage the information that you have built in your system. So, now for example, you can match jobs with employees' competencies. The system will provide us with a list of competencies which are typically required in this job. There's obviously a wealth of competencies defined here already. And then for those competencies, we can request the application to suggest the right people for this competency profile. And this will be based on a flexible scoring mechanism. The system will rank those people that scored the highest on these particular competencies which are associated with this job. And you can also select all your competencies in one shot. Then you can choose from the list the employee that looks most interesting to you and save that employee in the competency workbench. Once you save the employee on the competency workbench, you'll be able to do further work later on for this particular employee who was shortlisted during the job matching exercise. Another option we have is to use the best fit employee method. In this case, you will basically create a profile of desired competencies. Let's say you need somebody who has strong interpersonal skills, good professionalism, and a high level of integrity, and strong willingness to learn with background in science and technology. If that is what you need, you can tell the system to search in your database to find some of those people, and based on the scoring mechanism, the system will rank the right people for these particular competencies, prioritizing the ones that are most valuable, most urgent, and most important. So, therefore, I'm going to select the one that's been ranked at the top of the list, which is Barbara, and we will save Barbara to the workbench. So obviously, competency management is not just some academic exercise. The time invested in this effort is meant to allow you to find the right people who have the most potential and make sure that if there are specific gaps that need to be addressed, those will be worked on. That's why we go on the competency workbench, where we can evaluate people further. We can create training plans for those competencies and create career plans or succession plans related to those competencies. For example, if we select Barbara from the competency workbench and select the training, the system will take me automatically to Barbara's training plan, and I can go and add specific courses that I would like for her to take to help her develop those competencies. That is again the power of Two Interacts integration. Everything is one single system, but it's modular. So even if you don't need everything today, you can hold off and roll it out later on.